very good day. I'm Rashid Ogunlore, coach speaker, author of Sole Trader, and I'm delighted to be here with Paul Littlewood.
Good to see you, Rashid.
Paul Littlewood, financial advisor, specialist in pensions.
Yeah.
I've known you for now, best part of 10 years, so we were both in our youth. But I wanted to chat to you about pensions,
Okay.
and particularly talk to you about the topic about pensions for people who are sole traders, self-employed,
Yeah.
they're their own boss. I guess that many of us, when we're employed, it's all very well, we're lucky, it's all taken care of, and the organisation should have a pension pot and all of that kind of taken care of,
Yeah.
as long as we're joined, and now government have made things to make us join. But I wanted to talk about that funny journey when somebody decides to become their own boss,
Okay.
and that thing about having a pension. I wanted to just first of all start off by asking you, Paul, why is it one of those topics that lots of us really kind of bury our head in the sand? Is it something that you find a lot of the time that people have that bury their head in the sand, or they don't think about it? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think there's two types of people with regards to pensions out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the people that everybody thinks about them.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely believe that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have the people that think, oh, I really should sort out a pension, and then they'll think, I really should sort out the pension, and it goes on year after year, but they will wake up in the night and think, I should do a pension, and eventually they might meet a financial advisor and do one.
Yeah.
Then you've got the other people who think, oh, I must do a pension, and they do one straight away. The people that bury their head in the sand are just basically avoiding putting some money away now,
Yeah.
because they don't want to spend the money, but
Yeah.
actually they probably do know it needs to be done.
Or that they know it needs to be done. They may be, their financial circumstances may be that they're not as in a strong position as they might like, but they've got to nonetheless think about it and give it some thought.
Exactly.
So for people who are their own boss, have you got any general thoughts? I know that the rules and regulations around those things kind of change all the time, but any general thoughts for the person who has been employed up until yesterday and they decide that they're going to start up their own business? What are some of the general things that somebody who is their own boss now should think about? Because all of a sudden you've not got that comfort, you haven't got the salary coming in very regularly, and you haven't necessarily got that pension. What's some of the things that person should be thinking about?
Well, I think the first thing that they would need to do is I wouldn't recommend they continue, unless they know they have a set amount of money coming in or they've got a lot of money in the bank to cover them. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense for them to contribute into a pension when they first start a new business, because really the first job is to build up the business, build up the revenue, and actually know what's coming in each month. So if you don't, then it's just putting extra pressure on you paying into a pension. So give yourself a break, but don't allow the break to become 20 years. Revisit in 6 months or 12 months. But the good starting point is to look at what you've built up before you set up your own business, and make sure that's working for you as hard as it can, and make sure it's the right type of plan. So that will be my view. Review what you've built up, and give yourself a break until you know how much money is coming in.
Really good advice, Paul. So some people may have been in a company pension, may have been doing very well. Get some advice on how that is, where that is, and if you need to do anything with that.
Completely.
Right, but spend that time then initially building up the business that you're in a position that you can put some cash aside, because again you don't want to get even more into a financial hole, because presumably the money you put in your pension you can't easily withdraw it from the bank.
That's exactly the way to do it. So that is, I think the big thing is to make sure when you do start bringing in the revenue that you actually start paying into a pension, because sometimes you get so busy, if you're a director of your own firm, that you can overlook it, not from a cash flow perspective, but because it never gets to the top of your to-do list. But it's a big thing not to get to the top of your to-do list.
And it's extraordinary how the time can pass by. I certainly know that from when I was employed to then became my own boss, and very typically as you described, first of all I wasn't in a position to do it, and then you just get very busy with the business, and then before you know it, a long period of time could have passed by, 10 years could have easily passed by, and that's when that's really going to have a huge impact on you. And I just want to get a little bit of advice from you in terms of pointers from you, in terms of when people are looking for a financial advisor, because pensions aren't necessarily the most straightforward topic, and I know, for example, it's something that you specialise in. Is pension something that somebody can take care of themselves, or do you really need to see a financial advisor? And if so, can you give us some general pointers in terms of how to find one? Because I'd imagine, Paul, a lot of the time that people, as you said, you've got some of the people who know that I should be thinking about it and so on, but they may not even know where to start to be getting that advice, and we may not all be lucky enough to know a financial advisor, a pension advisor like yourself. So can you give us some pointers? Are there any circumstances in which somebody could do the whole thing themselves?
Well,
and how do you go about finding an expert to help you?
I think in terms of could you do it yourself, with all the changes around pensions, how you can take monies out of a pension, some ways are very tax efficient, other ways are not quite so tax efficient. The death benefits around pensions, they've become as complicated as they've ever been, which gives every individual trying to do it themselves not one or two areas where they could make a mistake, but 6 or 7 or 8. And it wouldn't just be impact on them, it could impact upon the people that should inherit the pension. So my advice would be it isn't worth the risk unless you really know what you're doing.
Unless you really have that expertise in that field, it's not worth the end.
So I think people do need advice. In terms of getting an advisor, I mean, it's a strange one. Ideally, you'd want to find an advisor that you know. So it might be somebody that you've met in a tennis club or a squash club, or watching rugby,
or going out there networking.
Or networking. So I think that's a great starting point. If it's an advisor that you referred to, that's another good starting point. And the more people your advisor looks after that you know, the better it is, because it shows you've got a circle of people that all know each other. And that have got a lot of, he must be doing something right. What you probably don't want is to take an advisor that would cold call you. Because some people would be able to cold call, they're very, very good on the phone. You've got to ask yourself the question, why are they, why are they cold calling? Where's the responsibility? And they've just not got the link.
And so the relationship thing is really important, isn't it? I guess so. So I guess that thing about going out there, networking, building your network, and starting off asking your network, asking people you know, do you know a financial advisor? Are they good, a specialist, and so on? Because I
think that's the way to do it, and that is, that will definitely be a benefit to you, because, I've had a couple of referrals since I came back from my break, and I got referred to somebody's father yesterday. I got referred to somebody's brother the week before. It's a close link. So
tell me then. I mean, that's interesting, and that will resonate with many people who are watching this who are very small and micro business owners or sole traders, freelancers, etc. And it's really nice hearing that, because many of us, when we're getting all sorts of services, we'll trust who do we know, and we trust, and it's great. That's exactly the same here, and it makes a lot of sense. If they work with lots of people then that trust element is there. Tell me, how did you get involved in this area, and because presumably you can identify with this because you work independently yourself.
Of course.
How did you get involved in this area? Did you always have a passion for pensions or finance? Were you always?
It's interesting. I wouldn't say I've always had a passion for pensions. So I wasn't like 11 years old thinking pensions is where it's at for me. I think I was more dreaming about perhaps an England debut.
What, in football?
Of course, which didn't happen. But then I studied economics and didn't realise actually I was genuinely interested in it, which was reflected in the grades I got. Which confused me why I was getting the grades, but it was because I was interested in that. And then becoming a financial advisor is like a natural thing to do. You can obviously go into being a fund manager, which I probably could have done, but didn't have the confidence when I first started out.
Or so that's someone who works for a pensions company or however it works, literally looking after the fund.
Exactly, managing the investments. Or you become a financial advisor, and then when I did become a financial advisor, I found the pensions, and really the pension's more interesting than any other aspect of it.
And tell me on that bit, I mean, I guess before we begin to wrap this up, and I guess I'm curious to know, when you do sit down there with a pensions advisor, and you've followed your advice, you've sounded somebody out, perhaps you've been lucky that there's been a recommendation, somebody, or you met somebody through their networking and so on. What kind of questions should you go about asking? Because I know that one of the things is that you're going to get the people who are very au fait with finance, investment, maybe they even do some investment, they may well know all sorts of questions to ask. But lots of people who haven't come from that particular space may well be very nervous, or might even feel intimidated if they're going to sit down with someone like yourself. Not that you're intimidating, but you know what I mean, when you're sitting down with an expert. What kind of questions should you ask, or what kind of information should you go in there armed with in order that you're able to get the best out of the person who's advising you?
Okay, well, I think you need to understand what the charges are. So you need to say, what's the annual management charge, what's the fund charge, what service do I get for paying an ongoing charge?
So in other words, there will be charges, just for those people who don't know, there will be charges linked to, obviously, the advisor's time, because they've got paid.
Exactly, so you need to understand, what the charges are. I think that's quite important. But I would ask about that and what you're going to get for it. I think you need to understand about the fund performance, and what type of fund that you're investing in.
So just ask those questions.
Yeah,
Tell me about the fund. How does it work? How is it run?
Yeah.
Just keep asking questions.
Yeah, exactly. And you do find, I mean, a lot of the financial advisor will answer a lot of the questions before you get to them, because he will go through those points. I mean, if you're looking at questions to benefit you that might not be raised by a financial advisor, it might be questions like, you know, how much should I pay in per month? If I wanted to retire on an income of, what would the contribution required be?
Yeah.
I've paid into my, you know, what's the state pension you'd expect to get? So they're the questions that, you know, the big one that people will ask is, as often they expect a financial advisor to wave a magic wand, is how much should I contribute? You know, which is an understandable question, but really it's one to work out more for yourself as to what you can afford you can contribute, and then pay the maximum you can. Because you can't do any better than paying as much as you can afford to.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really, really good advice. Paul, before we go, I mean, how often do you think that somebody should? So let's imagine that somebody's done this. They've sat down, they've got some financial advice, they've asked the questions, they've got themselves a pension fund and what have you. Things change all the time, and the economy changes all the time. At the time of filming this, we're at a point of lots of concerns about the world economy. Actually, probably it's been quite unusual, probably the last 8 or so years has been a time where there's been recession, dips and so on, that the economy's been, had quite a lot of ups and downs. How often should the individual sit down with their financial advisor or find out how their pension fund is doing?
I think once a year is, because you don't have to be doing it every month. So I think once a year to look at it. But if something's going wrong with the fund, then you know the advisor should typically look to contact the client. Right.
So is that right? So would there be occasions would there be occasions whereby for what's ever going on in the market or whatever, or a particular type of pension fund, because I understand one of the things that's been really useful chatting to you and so on is that there will be different types of investors, who have got different relationships to risks, they have different types of funds.
Completely. So
is this one of the occasions that if you've got a particular fund that might potentially on a good day have great yields, but in different times it may not be, so is this when you might get a call from your financial advisor saying, look, this is what's going on, maybe we need to review? Is that what a good financial...
Well, yeah, it's a strange one, because the financial advisor will be as disappointed by a fund that was performing, not performing, as the client. But the difference is the financial advisor needs to try and find out why that's occurring. Right. So, you know, M&G Global Dividend has been an excellent top performing fund, and it's suddenly come off the boil, so I called them up yesterday. I said, you know, what on earth is going on over the last 12 months? And I got an explanation as to the fact that, you know, they haven't invested, they've invested, part of the money's been linked to commodities, but they're now taking a different position and expect it to come back. So, you know, in those circumstances, it's quite tricky, because you don't quite know whether to move the clients out of the fund or to keep them in it. I think the best thing to do is to keep 50% in there, because it can turn itself around, and move the balance into a different fund. But, you know, you've got to understand what's going on in a fund, basically.
And presumably this is where having a financial advisor, and especially somebody who's very familiar with and specialising in pensions, is very useful.
Yeah, it is, but again, it's you know, since the middle of April, the FTSE's fallen by around 17%. And no financial advisor can stop that happening. But you know, I think the older a client is, the more they need to be looked after. So if somebody's 59, 60, 62, they're the ones that you really need to think, crikey, we need to have a chat with this person, because you've only got such a tolerance for it to fall. If somebody's, you know, 35 and 40, they've got 25 years to retirement, so we know the fund will come back.
This is really useful to know, Paul, and you know, without going too much into it, you talked about, of course, there's a financial advisor, then there's the fund, which will have fund managers, people who are looking after those particular funds. What bits, if any, for the person who's watching this, who is the business owner, should they know that you think might be useful for them then? Because I guess pension is, in our mind, something that's somewhere out there in the ether. Can you just, for an intelligent 12-year-old, just explain a little bit about where then, when we put in that bit of money, how that pensions world works out? Really simply, if you explain it to an intelligent 12-year-old.
Yes, I mean, so basically you make your contribution, so it goes into the pension, you get your tax relief on top of that, which you'd have explained to you.
Excuse me.
And then once it goes in, we would, you know, you look at your attitude to risk, look at your age as well, and then dependent upon your attitude to risk, we would select a fund, and that fund can invest in gilts, property, cash, stock market, UK, China, Hong Kong, Europe, and that's where the monies are invested.
So they're investing in different types of things. And gilts, for those people who aren't familiar with gilts, what's a gilt?
So gilt is just a government debt.
It's government debt, okay,
So, you know, if the government want to build a hospital,
yeah,
they would then issue gilts. And effectively, in terms of the gilt, they may say to the individual, if you give us £100, for the next 5 years, we'll give you £5 per year, and at the end of 5 years, you'll get your £100 back, and that is what a gilt is.
And so you've got this whole range, and from what little I remember about doing economics, this was a very long time ago, you've got from the things that very often in the past, things that related to kind of government things and bonds, and so it would seem to be very safe and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe in the UK, as long as the UK government doesn't go into liquidation, you know, we're absolutely safe. Once it starts trading, the price starts at 100, and finishes at 100, and you will get your £5 per year coupon, as it's called, which is the interest. But that 100 in between day 1 and year 5, for example, in a medium-term gilt, would go up and down. So it doesn't stay at 100 all the way through, it starts at 100 and ends at 100.
I see.
So there is a bit of volatility if you don't buy on day 1.
Right. So this is fascinating stuff. It's making me even more and more curious. So again, just for us to kind of, as we wrap up, for somebody who's watching this. So the first thing is that when you're your own boss, don't bury your head in the sand.
Completely.
Think about your pension. You were saying before, check in with how your pensions, if you're employed before, how they're doing at stage 1.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you were saying a little bit about perhaps you might give yourself a window in which to first of all get the business up and running, because you need to have that cash in the business to build the business up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the way to do it. And then once you've got it up and running, then revisit it, and then obviously start to make contributions.
Brilliant. Well, Paul, you've really kind of been brilliant and really just helped kind of simplify that. And I guess that, one of the key things, one of the things I take from this is that, you know, just make sure you get somebody you know, trust, and don't be afraid to ask themselves questions and to do some reading up, so that you can then build up your knowledge around it, and presumably as you build up your knowledge, you build up your confidence around your pension. Well, Paul, thank you so much. Wishing you all the best with all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Rashid.
And I can leave you to smile as I turn off the camera if you smile.